Hello, my name is Emma. Today we will talk about negative words like no, don't, doesn't, and didn't, and not. When do we use these words? Many learners have difficulty with these words. So let's learn how to use these words. So I have 4 sentences. Let's make these sentences negative. The sentences are, I have friends, I will see you, I can sing, and I work. Can you try to make these sentences negative with words like no, don't, didn't, doesn't, and not? Okay, let's look at the negative sentences. I have friends becomes I have no friends. Or we can say I don't have friends. Both are possible. I will see you becomes I will not see you. Or I won't see you. Both are possible. I can sing becomes I cannot sing. Or I can't sing. Again, both of these are possible. Finally, I work becomes I don't work. So let's look at when do we use no, when do we use don't, doesn't, and not. What are the grammar rules for these words? Okay, so we use not with be verbs. So when I say the be verb, I mean when we say I am, you are, he is, she is, we are, they are. These are all examples of sentences with the be verb when it's been conjugated. So let's look at examples with not. So I can say, I am not a student. Notice, not comes after the be verb. Am is the be verb. Not is after the be verb. We can say the same with you. You are not a student. He or she is not a student. We are not, actually there's a mistake here. We can say we are not students. They are not, again, same mistake. We'll just add an S here. They are not students. One other thing I want to mention is that we can also use a contraction. A contraction is when you combine 2 words and add an apostrophe. So for example, we can say, I am not a student. You aren't a student. Aren't, I'll write how it's spelled, is a contraction. It's are not together with an apostrophe. So we can say you aren't a student. It's the same with is, not. We can combine is and not to make isn't. And we can say he or she, he isn't a student. She isn't a student. And it looks like this. Okay. And the same goes for we aren't students. They aren't students. Now it's your turn. My dog is a cat. That makes no sense. Let's use the not word. What can we say? Well, we have the be verb is. My dog is not a cat. Phew, good. All right. What else can we say? Here we have the present continuous. We are learning English. So let's make this a negative sentence. We have the be verb. We are not learning English. Actually, I don't like this sentence because we are learning English. Let's change this to French. We are not learning French. That's a better sentence. Okay, let's look at some other negative words and how to use them. So, we use not with helping verbs, or you might call them auxiliary verbs, or maybe modals. So, a helping verb is a verb that helps the main verb. It gives information about the main verb. For example, Allie can ride her sister's bike. Ride is the main verb. We can say can is the helping verb here. So what are some other examples of helping verbs? Or again, these are all the same things. Modals, auxiliary verbs. Well, will, can, have, should, would, could, may, might are all examples of helping verbs. So let's see how we use not with these verbs. Okay, so now let's make a negative sentence. So remember, not is used with these helping verbs. So we have the verb can. We can say Allie cannot ride her sister's bike. Or we can say Allie can't ride her sister's bike. Notice not or the contraction can't is before the main verb. Ride is the main verb. Cannot or can't are the helping verbs in the negative form. Here is another example. I will not go. Go is the main verb. Will is the helping verb. So you'll notice that not goes between these. It's right after will. I will not go. We can also use a contraction. Won't is the contraction of will not. Will not together becomes won't. I won't go. We can do the same with should. I should not study at night. Study is the main verb. Should is the helping verb. Not goes right after should. I should not study. We can also say, if we use a contraction, should not together becomes shouldn't. I shouldn't study at night. You might notice cannot is one word, but will not, should not, have not, could not are two words, separate. Why is there a difference? Cannot is a special exception. Cannot is always one word. The rest of these with not are two words with a space. Okay, it is time for a quiz. Practice what you learned. Let's put the correct negative word here. You are no mad, or you are not mad. Which is correct? In this case, we have the be verb. So we know after the be verb, we use the word not. You are not mad. That's good. The next sentence, I would love to work 16 hours, or I would love to work for 16 hours. Is that true? No. So let's make a negative sentence. What do we put? Do we put the word not here? Or do we put it here? So we have our main verb, love, and would is the helping verb. So we can say, I would not love to work 16 hours. And there's actually nothing here. Okay, I would not love to work for 16 hours. Or I can say, I wouldn't love to work for 16 hours. All right, let's look at the third example. She going to school. So we need the word is. But to make this negative, where do we put the not? Or do we use no? Do we say she is no going to school or she is not going to school? Well, we would put not. And where do we put it? Well, is a be verb, so it goes right after the be verb. She is not going to school. And so there's nothing that goes here. Okay. So for simple present tense verbs, we use don't or doesn't. Let's look at don't first. Speak is a simple present tense verb. We can say, you speak Spanish. The opposite is you don't speak Spanish. Don't is a contraction. It's do not together becomes don't. We can also say you do not speak Spanish. That is possible too. Go is another example of a simple present English verb. So you go to church. We can make this a negative sentence by saying you don't go to church or you do not go to church. So what are some other simple present tense verbs? Play is an example of a simple present tense verb. He plays, she plays, I play. Work is another example. Travel, visit, look, do. These are all examples of simple present tense verbs. And so with the simple present tense verbs, when they are not be verbs and they are not helping verbs, we use don't or doesn't. Let's look at doesn't now. Okay. So for simple present verbs, when we are talking about he, she, or it, we use doesn't. For example, he likes dogs. Likes is a simple present tense verb. If I want to make this negative, I can say he doesn't like dogs. Or I can say he does not like dogs. These are both possible. Again, doesn't is the contraction of does and not. Does and not together becomes doesn't. Let's look at an example with she. She works. Work is a simple present tense verb. If I make it negative, I can say she doesn't work, or she does not work. Now, you might notice like has an S because we are talking about he. So when we conjugate in English, we add an S onto the verb for he. It's the same with she. She works. We add this S because we are talking about she. But in the negative sentence, we do not need an S. So he doesn't like dogs. There is no S here because of the negative. He does not like dogs. Again, no S because of the negative. It's the same with she. Works has an S. Doesn't work, no S. No S. So let's do an example together with it. It, he, and she all use doesn't. So here is the positive sentence. It rains every day. Let's make a sentence with doesn't. It doesn't. Okay, so now the verb I'm going to use is rain. Does it need this S? No. So we can say it doesn't rain every day. Okay, so no S. All right, let's look at some more examples of when we use negative words. Okay, time for a quiz. She sing and I sing. I want to make these negative sentences in the present tense. How do I do this? Do I use not, doesn't, or don't? Let's start with she. She don't sing, she doesn't sing, or she not sing. The answer is doesn't. So she doesn't. And do we add an S here? Do we say she doesn't sings? No, we don't add anything. There is no conjugation. We keep the verb in its base form. What about I? I don't sing, I doesn't sing, or I not sing. Well, in this case, we would use don't. I don't sing. And do we add anything to the end here? No, we keep the verb in its base form. Okay, so let's now think about the past tense. When we want to talk about the past and we are using a simple past tense verb, we use didn't. So here is an example. Last year, I didn't go. So go is my verb. And I'm talking about last year. So I can use didn't as my negative. Or I can use did not. So we can also use did not. Didn't is the contraction of did not. If you combine did and not together, it becomes didn't. Can we say this? Last year I didn't went? Well, went is a past tense verb. Is this okay? No, this is not correct. We need to keep it in the base form. So you don't change the verb. The verb stays in the base form. Didn't tells us it's the past tense. So we can do this with other verbs. Last year, I didn't travel. I didn't play. I didn't work. I didn't sleep. So again, the verb does not change. It's in the base form. What about for she or he? Is it different? Okay, for he and she, we use didn't for the past tense as well. It's the same for it. So it, he, and she, we use didn't. Last month, she didn't work. Do we need ed here because it's the past tense? No, we don't. Didn't tells us it's the past tense. We do not need ed in the negative form. If it was in the affirmative, she worked. In that case, yes, you would need ed. But in the negative form, you do not need ed. Last month, it didn't snow. So we're using it. We can use didn't or did not. Does snow need ed here? No. Why not? Because we are using didn't. We don't need ed and didn't. Didn't tells us it's the past tense. What about the last one, he? Last week, he didn't play. Do we need ed here? No. We just keep the verb in the base form because didn't tells us it's a past tense. So this might seem easy to you, but many learners make mistakes with didn't and don't and doesn't. So be careful because as a teacher, I see many mistakes with these words. And I don't want you to make these mistakes. I want you to learn from this and to make grammatical sentences. All right, let's look at no. We use no with nouns. What is a noun? A noun is a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. Let's look at some examples. No dogs allowed. Dogs is a noun. It's an animal. So we can use no in front of dogs. You'll notice we use no when we are talking about rules a lot. No swimming, no cats, no shirt, no service. So you will hear no with many rules. So let's look at another example. There was no bus. You might say, I see a be verb. Why don't we use not? Well, because bus is a noun, so the no goes with the word bus. It goes with the noun. There was no bus. Here's another example. I have no homework. No is describing the noun homework. We can also use no with ing noun forms, or also called gerunds. So, for example, you might see the sign no smoking. So this is a noun with ing. We call it a gerund. We can use no in front of it. Or no eating on the bus. So again, we have our ing form of the noun. So we can use no. You might wonder, well, can I say, I don't have homework? Yes, you can. You can say, I don't have homework, or I have no homework. Both of these are possible. You cannot say, I don't have no homework, because in English, we do not like two negatives in the same sentence. So you should have one negative per sentence. I have no homework, or I don't have any homework. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. The best way to learn is to practice and to test yourself. You can visit our website at www.engvid.com and take a quiz on everything you learned in this video today. You can practice don't, doesn't, no, and not, and when to use these different expressions. Remember, practice makes perfect. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel to see more videos on many different topics, including grammar, vocabulary, slang, and so much more. So thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.